The checkered mask stared at Brendan from the paper in his hands, dipping in and out of shadow as the streetlights passed by. Only a crayon drawing, greens and reds and yellows spilling out from between the lines like something that belongs hung on a refrigerator, but more surreal than anything he'd ever seen. When he'd first opened the envelope 3 days ago, his first impulse had been to call up the bureau chief and get the story rolling. The Harlequin was supposed to leave his mark spray-painted on concrete walls and chalked into murals on parking lots. It was meant for news feeds and heated online debates. It came with the territory of legendary pranks and political mischief. It was not meant to show up in Brendan's mailbox, but the letter on the back of the drawing hadn't asked for an article to be written about it. It hadn't asked for anything. It simply said, with an abundance of tildes and checkered hearts, Hello. I've read some of the things you've written about me. Flattery will get you everywhere, you know. I've decided that I want to meet you. If you'd like, you may find me at 11:00 p.m. on the day of the Lord at the address made manifest in the masterpiece on the front of this page. I shall wait for you. Yours forevermore, the Harlequin. There was an address hidden in the smeared lines of the picture. What a flourish. Why even hide it if you're going to blow the secret on the back of the same page? Like almost everything else the Harlequin did, it made Brendan's head hurt. He sat quietly through the remainder of the cab ride, trying not to think too hard about what he was doing. He busied himself reciting the 4 principles of interviewing in his head like a mantra. It reminded him of all of those gruelingly dull news writing classes, but the simple routine of it was somehow comforting in the middle of this escapade. 1. Prepare carefully. Sure. What was there to learn about the Harlequin that he hadn't learned during the other stories? Aimless pranks, wasted time, petty exhibition. People loved it. 2. Establish a relationship. Kind of a long shot, but the Harlequin certainly seemed to know who he was. Good enough, probably. 3. Ask relevant questions. This, he thought, would be the most important of them. He'd spent the better part of the weekend preparing an arsenal of questions which were, of course, loaded, weren't they all, but so elegant that no one would care. An important skill, often the only way to wring the truth out of someone. 4. Listen. 1, 2, 3, 4. The car rolled to a stop in the middle of a parking lot outside of an apartment complex. Fine little place, with lawns and ponds and walkout patios, all hidden beneath the snow. Not quite the rat's nest he'd been expecting. He paid the driver and buzzed the room number that had been hidden in the drawing. The intercom didn't seem to work, but the light went green nevertheless, and he started through the apartment corridors, searching for the Harlequin. 1, 2, 3, 4, he thought, unconsciously following the rhythm of the jazz playing out over the lobby speakers. Despite the heat rising into his cheeks and the quake in his step, he thought he was ready to put the legend to rest. 1, 2, 3, 4. It would look and feel like a regular interview, but this time next week everyone would understand that the Harlequin was only a person, a gibbering delinquent with nothing better to do than spoil the conversation. He found the door, and after a moment of apprehension, rapped his knuckle against it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Footsteps on the other side of the door. He inhaled deeply, straightened his back. 1, 2, 3. The door came open, and everything drained out of his mind. Ah, Pierrot, is that you? A pair of eyes stared at him from inside the darkness of the entryway, one red, the other gold. The way that the dark skin around them blended with the shadows made him think of the Cheshire Cat, smiling eyes and smiling teeth suspended in the air. The girl tilted her head to one side, gazing up at him. For a moment, he was still, taking in her curls and her green lips, and trying to make sense of the strange veil she seemed to be wearing over the top half of her face. He let his eyes dart away. Sorry? I'm here to see..." He paused, tried to think up a better way to phrase things. It felt strange to say the word out loud, but nothing else came to him. "To see the Harlequin?" The girl's grin widened. "Ha! It is you! Here, come inside. Unless, of course, you'd rather stand out there and..." She traced a fingertip along the line of her jaw. "Continue admiring the art?" The inside of the place was nothing like the rest of the orderly, white-walled apartment building. The walls of the Harlequin's flat were only visible in sparse patches between the countless psychedelic tapestries and concert posters. The doorways were all hung with beaded curtains. The air was thick with dozens of intermingling flavors of incense. Except for the crafting materials strewn across the floor and the disproportionately large number of books splayed open on the furniture, the whole place felt like some kind of tiny Arabic palace. "Welcome, Pierrot, to the den of the Harlequin." The girl dropped onto an oversized cushion and gestured for Brendan to sit on another nearby. "Colorful enough for you?" Under the soft glow of the paper lamps hanging about the flat, he could see that it wasn't a veil draped over her eyes, but a tattoo. A mask, green and checkered, drawn permanently around her eyes. Definitely colorful. "So, are you... him?" "Him?" She snorted. "I suppose that depends. Do I look like a him?" He tried to keep his eyes from flicking down to her tank top, which hugged her torso in a not entirely unpleasant fashion. No, I just, always sort of envisioned the Harlequin as a guy. Sorry. My name's Brendan, by the way." He held out a hand. "I mean, I guess you already knew that, but..." "Oh, I do," she said, taking his hand in both of hers and stroking it like a small animal. "I know who you are. You're Pierrot, and I'm the Harlequin. And here we are to talk like civilized people about Our Lady Columbine." Brendan pulled his hand away from her slowly. There had been a brief window of time between when she'd first opened the door and the words that had just come out of her mouth, where his mind was blank, wrapped up in the strangeness of all this, of the over-decorated apartment, of the girl with the strange eyes and the strange tattoo, of being called Pierrot, whatever that meant. But now that window was closing, and he could see that she was, in fact, exactly what he'd imagined, just with a different coat of paint and an expensive pair of contact lenses. He took another breath, straightened his back again. 1, 2, 3, 4. "I'm not actually sure I follow, but, He trailed off and gave her a lame shrug. "So, what do you want me to come out here for?" "Oh, such a big, serious reporter, man. I adore you, do you know?" She clasped her hands together, making a gun with her index fingers and thumbs beneath her chin. She pointed it at Brendan. "Sharp. You almost make me sound like something out of The Onion. Our favorite pretend activist successfully does nothing once again. Your praise is too high." "Well, it's not far from the truth, is it?" "Not at all." She placed a hand on her chest and held the other up in the air like Hamlet with an imaginary skull. "Truth incarnate. I am a pretender without parallel." "And what, you're proud of that?" He could feel the venom slipping into his voice. He pulled back, tried to recover. "I mean, it's understandable if you are. It's just, you've got so many people following your work. Some of my coworkers think you're like a legend. Aren't you concerned with the impact you're having?" She smirked, hid her mouth behind one of her petite hands. "Oh, I love the way you talk. Am I concerned with the impact I'm having? Oh, Pierrot, you're not writing an article right now. Go on, speak your gray little mind." "Gray little mind?" Brendan set his teeth and glared at her. It was bait, obviously. She was trying to get a rise out of him. He thought of all the questions he'd prepared so meticulously, all the traps he'd been planning to set for her. 1, 2, 3, 4. But she was right. That was for the articles. If he'd really wanted to turn this into a story, he wouldn't have kept it to himself. "Okay, yeah. So let's talk about my outlook." He was trembling now, perhaps with anger, perhaps with nervousness. He couldn't tell. "You are a child. People are out there trying to make a real difference in the world, And what do? You mock them. It'd be one thing if you were trying to send some kind of message or something, but are you? Everything you do seems so asinine. Like, one week you did that thing where you replaced all the ammunition in a gun store with jelly beans. Big, clever fucking prank, by the way. How do you even do something like that?" The Harlequin snorted again. "And then the next you're out plastering those god-awful Quack Lives Matter posters with the ducks on them all over the place? Whose side are you on? Do you even have a side? It's like you're just out there to make things harder for the people who do. Like, you just..." He shook his head, let out a long breath through his nose. If there were words to express what he felt when he saw her work, he didn't know them. Even if he did, he knew he would be too flustered to conjure them. The Harlequin gave him a small, enthusiastic round of applause. "Very good, Pierrot. I had no idea there was such fire in you." He scowled. "It'd be good if you could not patronize me. I didn't have to come out tonight." "But isn't it more fun this way?" She sprang up off her cushion and walked across the room, trailing a finger across Brendan's chest as she passed. Come on, let's go for a walk. There's something I want you to see." It seemed to Brendan that, in the Harlequin's head, a walk must have been something far grander than simply walking. She'd given him 4 spray bottles full of water to carry along, and she herself was wearing an overfull artist's portfolio slung across her shoulder. When he tried to question her about what they were doing or where they were going, she would give him one of her devious smiles and raise a finger to her lips. The whole thing was almost frustrating enough for him not to be utterly fascinated by it. Almost. The snow was still falling when she announced that they were here. Big cottonwood flakes drifting down through the dark sky, settling in a mantle over the city. She'd taken him to a lot of some kind, hidden beneath a few inches of whiteness. Maybe a parking lot, or maybe a particularly expansive alleyway tucked between a parking garage and the back of an apartment building. Except for the 2 of them and the distant brass of swing music playing out from an open apartment window, the place was empty. "Okay," Brendan said. "This is riveting. What do you want to show me out here?" The Harlequin didn't respond. Instead, she shifted the portfolio around to her back and dropped onto her knees in the snow. Everyone thinks you're supposed to build these things by rolling up a couple of big old snowballs and then stacking them. But that, my sweet Pierrot, takes far too long for me. She began to scoop the snow in front of her into a small pile, which she packed down to make it firm. She repeated this over and over, building on the pile, until she'd created a column of snow about 2 feet tall. Much faster. See? Here, I need one of those. She pointed to the spray bottles in Brendan's hands. He tossed one over, and she used it to spray down the sides of the column. "Are you building a snowman?" She jabbed a finger at him. "Ding, ding, ding, he's got it." "Well, almost. I'm building a few of them. You want to help?" He made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite voluntary. It fell off into an uncomfortable sort of grunt as he tried to hide it. Somehow, he hadn't been expecting the night to progress in exactly this fashion. "I mean, I'm already here. Might as well, right?" "Might as well," she echoed, her lips curved into that perpetual smile. Together, they filled the lot with a small army of snow people. Brendan built up uneven pillars, and the Harlequin sculpted them into surprisingly articulate human shapes. He still didn't understand the purpose of it, but after the first half dozen or so, he decided that he didn't actually care. How long had it been since he'd done something just to do it? It was nice. If he were writing about it, he might even have used the word cathartic. The sky was purpling into dawn by the time they were done. The Harlequin poked a pair of lopsided eyes into the final snow person, sprayed it down with the last of her bottle, and said triumphantly, "There, beautiful, isn't he?" Brendan looked at it, then at her. Kind of a mongoloid." A moment of silence. They stared at each other. And then, with an involuntary raspberry, the Harlequin burst into laughter. He felt a smile pull at the corner of his mouth. "You can't say that stuff," she said, catching her breath. "And please, he's beautiful. He's a perfect Adonis, and I love him. Now here, help me with these." She opened the portfolio and pulled a stack of laminated cardstock sheets from it. She passed them to Brendan, took one off the top of the pile, and placed it in the snowman's hands. "Finishing touches, then I can show you what we came here for." The smile faded from his face as he read the sign. "I am the 99,999.99%. He looked at the next sign in the pile. "Occupy Walmart." The next, "I'm making a difference." Smiley face. Nonsense. Pointless gibberish, not even intelligent enough to be parody. He wanted to say something, but he was still embarrassed after his first outburst earlier in the night. He knew she would just give him that patronizing smile, tell him that she was proud of him or something like that. He sighed and helped her make the rounds, transforming the Snow Legion into a mob of dead-eyed, mouthless protesters. After they'd finished, the Harlequin pushed him to take some pictures with his phone and then led him over the chain-link fence into the parking garage at the end of the lot. The 2 of them settled on a ledge outside of an unfinished construction area on the 3rd story, legs dangling in the air. From here, the snowmen almost looked like real people, standing around in an unorganized cluster, facing different directions. "Do you have the time?" she asked. Yeah." Brendan reached into his pocket to find his phone. "Don't you, though?" "Yeah, but I'm comfy." She had receded into her coat, leaving the sleeves hanging empty at her sides. He squinted at the screen. 5:22, he said, surprised at how much time had gone by. "Oh, we cut it close. They should be here soon." As twilight shifted into dawn, one by one, people began to trickle into the lot below. They came carrying signs and banners and wearing costumes over their winter clothes. At first, they didn't seem to know what to make of the snow people. They simply milled about as if they were part of the crowd. Then, suddenly, a wave of realization seemed to pass over them. It started with one woman who pointed at a snow person and said something loud enough that Brendan could just barely hear it from where he was sitting, then radiated outward. Others joined her, and from there it escalated into a full-on massacre. Posters were torn, heads shorn from frosty shoulders, bodies crushed in a carnage of powder white beneath the rubber soles of snow boots. Hours of work destroyed within the space of a few minutes. Brendan might have been frustrated if he weren't laughing so hard. Real laughter. The kind that made his cheeks hurt and blurred his vision with tears. The kind that reduced him to a breathless, heaving mass, too weak with joy even to form proper words. He and the Harlequin had collapsed together on the concrete, and they lay there on the ledge, gasping for breath, wet lines streaking their cheeks. It was all so ridiculous, like the protesters thought the snow people were a real threat, a rival gang on their turf or something. The thought launched him back into another episode of convulsive laughter. The Harlequin tried to form a sentence and lost it in giggles. She caught her breath and tried again. They're so serious. She propped herself up on her elbow beside Brendan. He could feel the warmth of her, the laughter on her breath. This is what I wanted you to see. You and them. Pierrot, you're all so serious. What do you mean? She let out a long breath and lowered her head onto his chest. The world is our Columbine, and you're all a bunch of sad gray clowns trying to show her how zealous and beautiful you can be. But maybe, her voice lowered into a whisper, maybe all she wants is a good laugh. His mind wandered to all those pranks he thought were so directionless and childish, the checkered masks left stenciled or drawn all over the city. He thought of how people shared pictures and videos of her work, and how, if they weren't fighting about the possibility of some underlying meaning, they were laughing. He thought about the scathing articles he'd written about her. He thought, and he felt a sinking sensation in his chest. She sat up, head cocked lazily to one side. Her red and gold eyes looked tired inside the tattoo mask. The laughter had all gone away, but the ghost of the Harlequin smile was still there. Did you believe me when I told you I was the Harlequin? I mean, Brendan said, more than a little caught off guard. You have the mask tattooed onto your face. She smirked, but genuine this time. Not the smile of some legendary trickster, the smile of a girl who is trying to be happy despite the world around her. Just a fanatic, I guess. I'm no more the Harlequin than you are Pierrot. Her smile seemed to quiver. I didn't bring you out here to make you understand, though. Really, I didn't think you'd be so receptive. I just wanted to give you a story. Tears were beginning to well up in her eyes, still wet from laughter. She dabbed at them with her sleeve and stood up. It takes more than one voice to woo the world, and there are so many more of you than there are of me. For every mask someone scribbles on a sidewalk, there are 1,000 sad clowns saying, Look at the fool. Our Columbine, she loves us, but you've got your fingers all tangled up in her hair, Pierrot, and I think she likes it. She forced her lips into one last grin before turning to leave. Write the story, dear. Turn the Harlequin into one strange girl with a strange hobby, and all the rest of them will give it up. I'd rather make a martyr of my hero than watch it languish in neglect. And then, like a dream, she was gone, vanished into the darkness of the garage. Brendan sat for a long time, watching the protesters in the lot below. He was still coming down from the euphoria of laughter, but a pit had already begun to form in his stomach. In the absence of the Harlequin, or whoever she had been, the world felt small and dull and terribly familiar. He hadn't laughed that way in years. He wondered when he would again. A look beneath the Harlequin's mask. That's what he would have called the story she wanted. The header would have been a picture of the crayon drawing she'd sent him in the mail. Real clickbait. The good stuff. But sitting there in the morning light, a better story came together in his mind. He could see the title in news feeds already. Legion of mysterious snow people attempt to crash protest, and the thought made him smile. So we're actually still dissecting this one, even after writing, recording, and producing it. To a lot of you, it'll probably feel like a pretty strange take on the heroes we've been dissecting this month. Really, we just wanted to zero in on that American folk heroes as the mythology of the self thing, but there's certainly some other stuff going on in this story as well. As always, we'd really like to get your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of our American folk hero? What would you have done differently? Oh, and before we go, a little update. We're not actually going to have a theme for August. Instead, we're just going to do one very special story, and then use the rest of the month to get things organized around the Foundry. But don't worry your fleshy little hearts, we'll be back to our usual shenanigans in September. Till then, thanks for watching, and keep making stuff up. We'll see you eventually. Bye!